Hi everyone, and welcome to my first podcast. My name is Kurt with Axtreme Guitar, and for this first podcast, I wanted to go over why do you play guitar? For some of you, why do you want to play guitar? And I guess the best way for me to have this podcast over that is to delve into my own personal experience. So, why do I play guitar? What got me to play guitar? Well, I'd always been into music my whole life, as far back as I can remember. I remember being 3 years old and using a little, I guess you would call it equivalent to my first Sony cassette player, and I would play songs over and over again and just be singing along while I'm playing along with my toys. So let's fast forward, and middle school. That was when I was 12 years old in the 6th grade, and I was at a school assembly, and an upperclassman, he was probably 7th, maybe 8th grade, gets up on the stage to open up the assembly with the Star Spangled Banner on the guitar. And when I heard him do that, I turned to my friend and said, I'm going to play guitar. And he agreed. He's like, yeah, I am definitely going to do that too. And to this day, both of us still play guitar. So it's pretty nice. But I had to go home and hound my parents about wanting to play guitar and convince them that it wasn't just another whimsical sort of thing that I was going to try. So it took a little while, but the following year, as a Christmas gift, my parents got me a Yamaha acoustic guitar, which I still have, and it plays pretty well. So, no lessons yet, but I had the guitar. I had no idea what I was doing with it. Don't know if it was in tune. And it was around that same time that the Aerosmith song, Living on the Edge, was popular, so I was trying to pick out something out of that song. It was just a one-note thing, and it was pretty pathetic, but I was desperate to try to do something. I had nothing. And very quickly I discovered that it hurt my finger a lot to do this, and I was just using my pointer finger for a while there. Eventually I shifted to a different finger until that finger started to hurt and tried the same thing. I even tried putting a Band-Aid on my finger and playing it. That didn't really work out so well. It was just dulling the note, and it just wasn't a thing. So during my 7th and 8th grade years, I had met a couple of other kids who were actually getting guitar lessons, and they were into Guns N' Roses and Metallica and stuff like that. And I had just started to get familiar with Metallica. I had known of Guns N' Roses pretty intimately as far as their Appetite for Destruction album with Sweet Child of Mine, Night Train, Paradise City, all of those big hits. So my friends try to show me a little bit of stuff, not much, but it was just awesome to be in that atmosphere, and I was of course envious that I wanted to be able to be a part of it and do that kind of stuff too. I didn't expect to ever be able to play solos. I just didn't have a very high expectation of my abilities, but I was very much into the idea of being able to play rhythm guitar parts and sing along with songs and just enjoy myself doing that, and that was all that I thought I was going to be capable of for a good number of years, actually. So the summer after my 8th grade year, I finally got guitar lessons, and that was great. But between 6th and 8th grade, I had also discovered the Beatles, and I enjoyed their stuff because, I mean, there was basic acoustic kinds of chords going on, and there was plenty of singing and harmonies and so on, so that fit right into what I enjoyed a lot too. And now, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the Metallica, Green Day, Offspring, Bush, Alice in Chains, and all of the other harder rock or punk rock, metal, and all of that kind of stuff. But I also enjoyed the acoustic sounds that I could get as well. So when I finally started to get the guitar lessons in summer of '94, I was just on fire with learning as much as I could, especially Beatles music, because it felt a lot more reachable for me. Now the cool thing was that the guitar teacher that I was able to get, for one thing, he was giving me lessons for 1 hour, which was great. He's also from England, so he had that very thick British accent, which, of course, at that time, being a major Beatles fan, I was like, wow, it's kind of like being taught by one of the Beatles. But he had this really thick book of all the songs the Beatles ever played, whether they were covers or their original songs, and he let me take that. And I had it in my possession for at least a couple of years, where I was just constantly digging into it at random, like, I feel like trying this one out. and I did that constantly. But let's rewind back to my very first guitar lesson. So I meet this guy, and we talk a little bit about the guitar, the parts of the guitar, the strings, and how to fret notes and chords. And then I shared with him that I'm a major Beatles fan, and he happened to have that book that I mentioned. And he said, why don't we start with Love Me Do? It's just 3 chords, and it's basic strumming. It won't be easy at first because the switching to different chords is a little bit quick. So he showed me G, C, and D. And I went home that same evening and played nonstop G, C, and D with the song. I did a terrible job with it, I'm sure. And my fingers were killing me, but I just kept trying to go at it. I reluctantly would take breaks and then come back to it. There were days that I would be trying to come back to it, and my fingers were just screaming at me that, no, that's not happening. So at that point, I didn't realize that I could have iced my fingers, and that might have helped a little quicker. That's something that I tell a lot of my students now is, if you're having some serious soreness in your fingers, try icing the fingertips. It's one of those things that my wife brought up to me that I never thought of. I could have been using that 30 years ago. So a couple months after I first started guitar lessons, I was talking to a few of my friends who were also just starting to learn their instruments. One of them was learning the drums, the other was on the bass, and another friend who had a little bit more experience in guitar was able to handle some lead kind of work. So we developed our very first garage band. So that was fall of '94. And so I ended up being the singer and rhythm guitarist. And so some of the songs that we ended up playing were Green Day songs like Basket Case, Longview. We also played Enter Sandman to death. And that did open up the opportunity for me to write a song for the first time. Nothing terribly great, but not bad. It kind of followed in the shoes of the Green Day style, where it was just power chords. It just kind of made it happen. And me and the drummer and another friend who happened to be visiting that day that we had written that song started throwing some lyrics together. I'll have to see if I can pull it up out of the archives somewhere. I've got old cassettes that I had recorded some stuff way back when. If I can find those and they're still actually playable. I do have a cassette player buried somewhere in storage that hopefully will still work. Well, the garage band thing was fun, but at that same time, I was going through some hard times at home. My parents were going through the divorce, so it made things difficult, and I ended up moving, so I was a bit further away from where my friends and I used to live. Now my new location would take me about a 45-minute drive to get to my friends, so my practice time with them was only once a week, while they were getting together a few more times than I was. But I also discovered that my drive and my hunger was not the same as theirs. We had a lot of fun getting our practices in, but when we would get together on the times that I was able to get there, I didn't want to stop. I could have gone for hours. And maybe it was because they had had more than one practice throughout the week on their own without me, but I kind of think that even if I were there the other days as well, I would still have wanted to keep going. That was a turning point for me where I noticed that my drive, my obsession was a bit deeper than what a lot of other people's drives are in something like that. So we did have a chance to play a block party, and we had a good reception for that. We were playing all those covers that I was mentioning before, and we did a decent job. Eventually, I had to move out of the state. At that time, I was living in Maryland for a while, and so when all of the things between my parents were settled as much as they could be, we ended up, me, my dad, and my stepmother, moving to Massachusetts. Now it was February of '96. So at that point, that would mean that playing with the band would end, and guitar lessons ended. So for a number of years, I was just teaching myself. I was practicing a lot, and it was a good experience. I enjoyed doing what I did on my own, because some of the things that I discovered was that I was puzzling out songs, listening to them, just basically learning by ear. I picked up on skills. I was exploring different genres here and there. I mean, more of the genres that I discovered later on, but at that time I was working in like the oldies things that the Beatles did, and some Jimi Hendrix, some Metallica, well, not some, a lot of Metallica, and a lot of other mainstream rock kinds of things, the contemporary stuff, especially the grunge move that was going on in the 90s. And I remember at some point I wanted more. I wanted to understand scales and things. So I was trying to just figure it out myself, which was not really an easy thing to do. But at the very least, I wanted to figure out the major scale on the guitar, and I did that. And I started to use it in every song that I was playing. I was basically making every song that I was playing, especially the Green Day songs, my jam tracks. And I was just throwing the major scale in every position that I could to just kind of go all over the place, trying to make little solos. I still didn't expect myself to be a soloist at all, but it didn't matter to me. I enjoyed doing it anyway. My attitude was, yeah, okay, so I'm not going to be great at it. I'm not going to be good enough to carry a solo in a band. But yeah, I'm going to do it anyway at home just because it's fun. My expectations, maybe you could say more, my self-esteem was not very high on that side of things. I was more interested in really just honing my skills with the rhythm work and singing along, which in itself is a lot anyway. But in my mind, between 16 and 18, I thought that, well, that's not so hard. I just have to really get the timing down. And then, of course, do a good job of singing, which is a lot more work than at that time I realized. Throughout those years when I was living in Massachusetts, people were noticing my abilities on the guitar. A lot of them were non-musical friends that were just blown away at some of the things that I was able to play and sound just like the song from the album or off the radio. I didn't think much of it then, because I just figured, well, you know, I'm just mimicking what these songs sound like, and all of the accomplished musicians can do that and more. So I didn't really look at what I was doing as anything particularly impressive. Yeah, it wasn't easy to do, but I played it over and over and over again so that I could get to that point. It wasn't until my musical friends, the ones that had been playing instruments over a long period of time, that I knew were good at what they were doing and knew things that I didn't know, when they started noticing me and were similarly impressed with things that I was doing, that's when I started to kind of wonder, am I as good as they're saying I am? So throughout those years and those experiences, I was still carrying that same mindset that I just want to be able to express myself in the music. I want to be able to try all these different things and just be free in it. I certainly did not feel free in the sense of soloing, because I had no idea what I was doing outside of regurgitating what I had figured out by ear when playing certain songs like the Metallica songs or playing those major scales over Green Day songs. So there was definitely no freedom in my playing at that point, in that sense. I even worked on trying to create more songs shortly after I had created that first one. And I do have lots of scraps of paper of my notes of attempting to create songs, and I have lots of recordings on cassette of me trying different things with chords. And at some point I had also discovered instrumental guitar songs. For a long time I had been wishing that I could find something like that, but just never really knew where to start looking for it. And I didn't have YouTube to look up anything. And we didn't even have a computer in my home for the longest time. My parents held off on that. But when they finally did get one, it was not capable of getting on the internet. But I did stop at a lot of the music stores pretty regularly. And I remember one of the times that I was just hanging out with one of my friends. I was probably about 17. And we stopped in a music store somewhere. And I found this area of where the CDs were being sold. And just on a whim, I was looking at random things, and I came across this Joe Satriani guy. Did not know who this was. It was just dumb luck that I happened to find this album, and it had some pretty awesome guitar work in there. Crazy good. And of course he is virtuoso guitarist. And I discovered later on, after listening to the album, that he was actually the guitar teacher for Kirk Hammett, who is the lead guitarist for Metallica. He was also the guitar teacher for a few other notable guitarists as well. So it was no surprise after I'd heard that album that, oh yeah, clearly that makes complete sense with what this guy can do. So hearing Joe Satriani for the first time was a big deal for me, because I started to look at guitar in a whole different way, and it just kind of added more depth to, why do I want to play guitar? Just point to that Joe Satriani album that I bought then. That's why. I want to be able to do that. And, of course, the Beatles albums and the Metallica stuff and the Green Day stuff. I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to play like that. So I had to really hone in on things, hone in on my skills. I mean, I was practicing all the time, but I didn't have a guitar teacher to help make my practice more efficient. I know that if I did, things would be a bit different now, but I'm not saying that I regret anything or that I would change anything necessarily, because the experiences that I have had have been a big reason of why I'm able to do what I am now. And it was the journey that I went through during that space of years that added depth to the skills that I have. But again, having a teacher would have helped in honing my skills, giving me more focused practice. Again, why do I play the guitar? Why did I want to learn to play the guitar? Well, if I think back to all of the years since I first made that decision to want to play guitar, I love to create things. I love to work with making my own melodies. Even if I'm working with a song, like a cover song, I like to be able to create my own melodies from a lead sense, whether it's a jam track or a cover song, and just have some fun with that. And just discovering all the different things that I can do with it. I don't have to play like Eddie Van Halen, Jimi Hendrix, Joe Satriani, or any of the other great guitarists out there. I don't want to be any of the other great guitarists. I just want to be me, able to do the things that make me feel good. And that's really what the whole importance of this particular podcast is. It's not becoming someone else, but becoming who you are as a guitar player. And I'm happy with where I've come. And I know that there's a lot more that I'm going to be looking to do. So if you haven't already, maybe one thing that you could start doing is thinking, why do I want to learn to play guitar? And it could be for any reason. You don't have to have this, I need to play guitar because I want to be a star. You don't even have to tell me necessarily, but why do you want to learn to play guitar? Maybe it's because you want to be able to pick up a guitar and just have fun after a long, busy day. Or because you want to be able to pull out a guitar, sitting around a campfire with a bunch of friends and play some songs. Whatever the case might be, any reason that you bring up is valid. I mean, it could be a guy saying, I want to learn to play the guitar so I can attract the ladies. Whatever works for you. But you got to think about, why do you want to learn? And just kind of dig into that. See how you can motivate yourself. I tell all of my students to keep some of those kinds of things in mind. Set up some short-term and long-term goals. And ideally, share those short-term and long-term goals with me so that I can help you to reach them. So we can try to set up checkpoints, assess how we're doing over time to see, well, what do we need to do here to make this feel like we're in the right direction. You know, I'm kind of like the Mr. Miyagi of guitar for a lot of you. So just think about those kinds of things. Anyway, if you're still listening, thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next one.